All right, everybody, welcome. We are live here at Moneyline MMA as always, a little bit later than usual this Monday afternoon, as Jose and I had some month end duties for our jobs here. Yeah, curse us for having stuff to do during the day. We had a little bit of busyness to handle before starting our show tonight, but we're here as always. We will always make time to be here for you guys and give you our picks for UFC Vegas 90 coming up this Saturday. This is finally the first card, or the last card, I should say, before UFC Vegas 300, or sorry, UFC Vegas. I'm just in the whole role of saying UFC Vegas. UFC 300 will be a week from Saturday. So this is the final card and leading up to that. And you guys will be able to tell that pretty easily because a lot of the fights on this card are just not, they're just not worthy of being main event fights. I'm sure you've heard that from plenty of the other people you may have been listening to regarding your MMA knowledge and information. So I'm not going to sit here and beat a dead horse. We all know this card is underwhelming. We all know most of the fights on this card deserve to be prelims on most cards. But hey, it is what it is. We love fighting. We love MMA, and that's why we're still here discussing these fights, no matter how big of a name most of these fighters have. And that being said, quick recap of last week. My 5-weight. Finally on a rebound, hits again. Nursultan Rozabayev. I told you guys, trust this man. And he ended up hitting it. It was pretty easy. And unfortunately for Jose, that was the highest weight pick of Jose's that actually ended up hitting because Bruno Silva and Aaron Blanchfield both took the L's. Tried to tell Jose about Manon Fiorot. That was a great fight, no doubt about it, but Fiorot did exactly what I expected in that she was going to stuff takedowns and just duke it out on the feet. And Aaron Blanchfield, not that she seemed completely outmatched, but you could just tell. She's got some improvements to make, and that's fine, right? She's so young. I think she's got a lot of room to improve, and I still strongly believe Aaron Blanchfield will be a champion one day. I just think she's, it's one of those moments that I was able to see coming with needing more practice, needing more of the high-level experience before you're able to hoist the belt of the UFC. So tough day for Jose, not winning either his 5 or 4 weight, but in the end, both of us went 2 and 3 last week. So we're going to bounce back. But what's really going to happen here is our 5 and 4 weights are going to continue to be strong. So definitely keep an ear out for who we are picking. And leading straight into that, as always, I'm going to give my 5-weight pick first, and we're going to let Jose give his weights, and we're going to go down in confidence from there. Any new listeners, we do our picks here in a 5-weight system where we pick 5 fights of the 13 fights on UFC Vegas 90 and weigh them in order of confidence. Therefore, on this Saturday, the fight that I am picking is my most confident is actually going to be a prelim, or at least what's currently listed to be a prelim. Some places have it as one of the first cards of the first fights of the main card, but I'm currently seeing this as a prelim. This is Court McGee versus Alex Morono, welterweight bout. I got a lot of respect for Court McGee. He's a dog, right? And he's been around the UFC for so long, right? I mean, we can look back in 2010 when he was fighting for a belt. Like, it's just crazy how long Court's been around. And in all reality, he's just like the beacon of hard work paying off. He isn't necessarily a guy who's got like amazing striking or amazing grappling, but he just grinds it out, and you got to respect him for it. All the while, I just think Alex Morono, he's just better in my opinion in all facets of this game. I understand that both of these guys are coming off losses. So Alex Morono, though, is coming off a loss against Joaquin Buckley, who, as I picked against him last week, he ended up getting the win. So Joaquin Buckley is to be respected. He ended up beating Vicente Luque against my pick and against Jose's pick as well. So I think Joaquin Buckley's to be respected, and losing to him isn't that big of a deal. Alex Morono goes the distance, avoids the KO. I don't think Court McGee has a single chance to win this fight outside of maybe decision. To me, that is the one and only shot he's got to beat Alex Morono. I don't think it's going to be a factor. I think Morono has a high chance to finish this fight, and if he doesn't finish it, I think it's going to be a dominating win either way. So that's what I got for my 5-weight. Jose, what do you got on this fight?
Yeah, Nick, I agree with you. I have Alex Morono as well. He is my 3-weight, and like you said, both of these guys have a lot of experience in the UFC, and I like Alex Morono. Both guys, like as you mentioned, both guys are coming off a loss, but Joaquin Buckley, again, he just came off a win as well. And I like this matchup just mostly because Court McGee, yeah, he's also getting up there. He's 39 years old. Alex Morono is 6 years younger than him. And again, both these guys have been in the UFC for a while. So when it comes to their stats, looking at them right here, I like what they're throwing on the feet. Both guys throw a high volume, land a high percentage of punches on the feet. Court McGee lands 4.63 and Alex Morono lands 5.02. And when it comes to the grappling department, maybe Court McGee would be the one to engage in it more. But Alex Morono does have 7 submissions on his record, so I don't think he'd be worried at all if Court McGee tries to initiate any takedowns whatsoever. Overall, I think Alex Morono is the better fighter in this one. So I agree with you. I feel really good about Alex Morono. He is my 3 weight.
Yeah, man. And just as a last quick note, like I do notice what you're saying about Court McGee having a lot of submission wins on his record. But to be honest, man, a lot of those came before his big run in the UFC. Like looking back at a lot of Court McGee's wins, we got to go back to 2010 to find a few of his submission wins. And just to make sure, let me see this. It has been, yes, it has been since October 23rd of 2010. That is 9.5 years for those who can't do math. Or sorry, I can't even do math. That's more than 10 years ago for those of us who can actually think and do math. I just don't see any threat there whatsoever. Alex Morono's never been submitted either. And he's at least gotten a submission recently. He submitted Tim Means last year. That's a good high-level fighter to submit. Like you said, we agree on this, so it's not like we're arguing, but it's just fascinating. Like, Court McGee just does not pose much of a threat at all, in my opinion, and the age is also a good point. So, Jose and I both agree with a combined 8 weight between us both, my 5, Jose's 3, that Alex Morono will get the job done on Saturday.
And yeah, and with that being said, that brings us over to both Nick and I agree with Alex Morono, and that brings us on to our my 5 weight. And my 5 weight, this is actually the main event, the middleweight bout between Brandon Allen and Chris Curtis. Right now, Brandon Allen, he is the betting favorite at I just had him here.
He's like 200, I think. I can pull it up quick. It's 225.
Yep. He's the betting favorite at -225, while Chris Curtis is the betting underdog at +172. This one, I like Brandon Allen a lot. He's just riding an incredible win streak right now, a 6-fight win streak, and his last loss is to Chris Curtis in the second round. So this is their second matchup. And Chris Curtis, he's kind of been in an up and down. He's got some wins over Marc-Andre Barriault and Joaquin Buckley, but then he's also got a couple losses from Kevin Gastelum and Jack Hermanson. This one, Brandon Allen, even though he did beat Brandon Allen the first time, I think since then Brandon Allen has just matured so much and gotten better. He is also younger, 8 years younger than Chris Curtis. And what happened back in 2021, I would even say, like, you could even say that, I'd have to go back, but like I feel like Brandon Allen probably could have won that matchup too back then. But I think just since then he's really proven himself to be much of a better fighter in terms of like a finisher. He doesn't have the power like Chris Curtis, but he does have the grappling skills. And I wouldn't be surprised, if he tries to get a submission on Chris Curtis. Chris Curtis has only been submitted one time in his career, in his entire career. But Brandon Allen, his submission game is legit and it's real. When he's like, it's like if Jared Mearshardt's gonna go up and compete, I'm gonna definitely put money down that he's gonna get a submission on this one. I would even say a rear naked choke, and you best believe Chris Curtis is expecting that. He's expecting the Brandon Allen to try to take his back. And I think I like the size matchup as well. Brandon Allen, he's a few inches taller than Chris Curtis. He's 6'2", and Chris Curtis is 5'10". And Chris Curtis does have a half-inch reach advantage. And he does land a lot more strikes than Brandon Allen. So if he gets, if he just takes off, then I could see him possibly putting out Brandon Allen again. But and then he's also, as we know, Chris Curtis trains with Sean Strickland, and Sean Strickland was able to put down Brandon Allen via strikes as well. So just on the feet, I think Chris Curtis may get the harder punches. He may get like the harder hits on Brandon Allen. But I think if Brandon Allen, if he needs to understand in this matchup, he's going to be the better wrestler and one to engage more in the grappling. So this one, I'm riding really confident with Brandon Allen. I think he's he's a better fighter, and I think he's going to win this pretty much overall through grappling and ground and pound. So this one, I got Brandon Allen. What are your thoughts on this fight, Nick?
Interesting. So we're going to disagree on this one. I've got Brendan Allen. Not quite, obviously not as high as my 5 weight because we already discussed my 5 weight being Alex Morono. So I'm a little less confident here, but I do have a 3 weight on Chris Curtis. So we're going to reverse here. My 5 weight and your 3 weight will be the first fight, and your 5 weight and my 3 weight will be the first fight, except this time we're disagreeing. And for me, like, I can respect a lot about what Brandon Allen's been able to do lately, but in all reality, I think we could kind of dismantle multiple of his wins down to being like not so significant, right? Like Jacob Malkoun, he arguably didn't even beat. Christoph Jacko isn't in the UFC anymore and got popped for steroids. Andre Muniz is mid. Bruno Silva just lost last week, and I'd love to talk about that because he got eye poked in a submission or a TKO, which is ridiculous. I completely disagree with how that went down, and the fact that they didn't mark that as a no contest is just wild to me. You could just eye poke guys and then they go down and finish them, and that's a KO nowadays. Which is a little ridiculous, but there's still no doubting that Bruno Silva did not look that great even before the eye pokes. He was losing the fight. And Paul Craig, I think we all know what kind of fighter Paul Craig is. He's okay at striking, but like, come on, if Paul Craig doesn't get a submission, he's losing the fight. In all reality, I don't mean to sit here and discredit every single one of Brendan Allen's wins, but we're just at a point where Chris Curtis is just, in my opinion, a bad stylistic matchup for Brendan Allen. Chris Curtis has been a difficult man to take down. I understand that he hasn't fought a whole bunch of submission artists and back to back in his entire career, but he does have wins against guys like Rodolfo Vieira, who is an extremely dangerous Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt. And guess what? Rodolfo Vieira missed on all 20 of his takedown attempts. So in my opinion, it's very clear that with a lazy wrestler, a lazy offensive wrestler specifically, you're not going to get Chris Curtis taken down. If we want to look at statistics, 92% of the attempted takedowns against Chris Curtis in the UFC have been deflected. The only man who's been able to do that in terms of actually take Chris Curtis down is Nasruddin Imavov, and that fight went to a no contest anyways. So I don't know, man. I'm really looking at this like a bad stylistic matchup for Brendan Allen. You mentioned in part of your handicap that Chris Curtis is going to be ready for Brendan Allen's takedowns, and that's exactly why I like Chris Curtis, because guess who one of his best friends is? Sean Strickland. And Sean Strickland is a great wrestler. I think he's a great person to spar with in camp. And in all reality, the only thing that would make me maybe a little nervous is like, okay, Chris Curtis is taking the fight kind of on last minute, because this was supposed to be, to my understanding, this was supposed to be Brendan Allen versus Marvin Vettori at first, and Vettori backed out with a Chris Curtis late replacement, but it wasn't like super late. It wasn't like last week or 2 weeks ago, right? It was technically a late replacement, but Chris Curtis has had some time, and he comes across to me as the guy who's always ready to go anyways, as part of the nature of training with Sean Strickland. So to be honest, man, I really just see this playing out very similarly to how the first fight did. I want to also mention that this will be a small cage. This will be in Vegas. This will not be a big cage like they had in Atlantic City. And to me, that's a significant difference. Chris Curtis will be able to push the pace, on Brendan Allen. And look, I guess Chris Curtis's one downside too could maybe be, oh, he doesn't have an insane amount of power, right? You look at Chris Curtis and you'd expect him to have a lot of power. His first 3 wins in the UFC and first 3 fights were finished by knockout wins, and 3 of his 6 first fights in the UFC were won by KO, and he's not gotten a KO since. And some people, even as far as I think like Paul Felder, not to drop names or anything, even went so far as to say that Chris Curtis's fight against Marc-Andre Barriault looked like a sparring match. And you know what? That might be true, but he won the fight. And in my opinion, even if he fights Brendan Allen like a sparring match, he's going to win because he's going to deflect the takedowns, and the size just isn't going to be enough of a difference in my opinion. So to me, final note, underdogs, I said it last week when I picked Fierro, they are 7-11. Underdogs are 7-4 in the UFC in 2024. They have almost doubled the favorites in wins. And to me, that's a huge factor. Sorry, I'm trying to say factor in this. I love that recency in that statistic. So I'm going to keep riding it, man. Give me Chris Curtis. I think this is a great stylistic matchup for him against Brendan Allen. So yeah, that being said, I got Chris Curtis, 3-weight. Jose's got Brendan Allen, 5-weight. And I'm going to move us right on to the 4-weight pick of the afternoon. And this is going to be an exciting one because we've got a little brother coming up to fight. And this is a heavyweight fight. I usually stay away from a lot of the heavyweight fights because it seems to be a lot of puncher's chance going on, especially when it's guys making their debut. So take this pick with definitely a grain of salt, right? Because this is my 4-weight. And It's going to be a very heavy favorite for weight as well. I'm talking minus 400. If we're looking on the entire main card, not pay per view, just the entire ESPN Plus main card, Walter Walker is the biggest favorite, and he will be my four weight of the afternoon to beat Lucas Brzeski. And look, I mentioned this is a younger brother of Johnny Walker, a current UFC light heavyweight who's trying to make his push for a championship fight, but is probably going to come fall short because he's not able to get enough wins back to back. This is his little brother in the heavyweight division, currently residing in Russia, and he's making his UFC debut. He was supposed to fight Jake Collier last year, it got canceled, and now he's fighting Lucas Brzeski. And I really think it's just going to be more of the same. In terms of Lucas Brzeski has disappointed very strongly in his UFC tenure so far, being 1-3, losing to Martin Buday, Carl Williams, and WCA now in 3 back-to-backs. And look, I think the unfortunate times are going to continue for Brzeski here. Walker is just a huge human being. He is 6'6", 81-inch reach, and he fills out every single pound of the heavyweight limit. Every single one. Lucas Brzeski is a little smaller, and that might not matter. Like if it's like a John Jones or something, like you can be under the 265 limit, and we're not that worried. But when we're talking about a dude as big as Walter Walker with the wrestling pace that he has put on in his previous fights, I don't even think it's going to be close. I think he takes down Lucas if he wants. He knocks out Lucas if he wants. Lucas has not been submitted professionally yet, but let's just be honest. There's no one in the heavyweight division that would even bother to try submitting him, especially in the UFC that he's fought so far. Martin Buday, Carl Williams, WCA, those are all guys who want to stand and strike anyways. So in my opinion, this is going to be a breeze. I could almost put this as a 5-weight, but again, the only reason I don't is because this is a heavyweight UFC debut. You just never know what can happen. One punch can change everything. Jose, what do you think?
Yeah, Nick. Honestly, I'm with you on Walter Walker. He's my 4-weight actually. I put him high just because. Yeah, I mean, if he's related to Johnny Walker and he's a heavyweight and he's younger, man, I can just imagine like I haven't seen much of him, but from what I do see on his record is he's got 6 KOs, 1 submission, and 4 decision wins. So he is a little he is versatile and dynamic, and when how he approaches his game is from what I see, he's well, Johnny Walker's more of a stand-up explosive guy, but from what I understand is Volter, he is more like a wrestler and he's going to engage in the takedown. So the way and right now Lucas he has a 42% takedown defense, so I'm expecting Volter to actually take him down and ground and pound him. And because Lucas's record thus far, he's just lost 3 in a row, including first round knockout to WCA, who's also like an up and coming prospect in the heavyweight division. I can see something similar, unfortunately, happen to Lucas as well. Again, in this fight, I can see him being taken down and ground and pounded and being finished within the 3 rounds. So I feel pretty good about Volter, especially because he's undefeated and he's a walker. So that being said, yeah, I got Volter on this one, Volter Walker.
Sounds good. Yeah, I think we both agree, and I think you make a good point. I think he's just gonna. Ideally, he does just wrestle, ground and pound. That's probably the least damage path to him getting the victory and coming right back as fast as he can. I think the final note I'm gonna make on this is that I know I've discussed with Jose and some of my other buddies in the past, and I'm not sure how much we've mentioned it on the show, but I am very confident that the UFC puts together, like, they're not, it's not rigged, right? They're not telling fighters that you have to lose or you have to win or you have to do this or that, but I strongly believe the UFC does put in narratives into the matchmaking that they're doing, and they know what strengths and weaknesses their fighters have. And they can kind of formulate and put together matchups to those weaknesses to kind of massage the outcome, right? You may not be dictating the outcome, but you're kind of massaging it. You're like, yeah, we got this new prospect. Let's ease him in against a nice striker who's not going to do too much, like Lucas Brzeski. I think it's a great initial matchup for Vitor Walker to come on, demand a quick, easy finishing win, and just get a lot of respect from UFC fans. He's going to be one of the next guys, I think, in the heavyweight division that they push going forward. So we'll have to be ready to bet against Walter Walker soon. But right now, I think as he's getting pushed to some of these easier opponents in the UFC, let's ride the wave until he starts fighting some ranked opponents. So, but yeah, that being said, Jose, do you want to move on to your 2-weight I think we've covered both of our 5, 4, and 3 weights. We just have our 2 weight and 1 weight remaining.
Yeah, wow, that we jumped up quick, and yeah. So from that being said, yeah, my two weight. This is the featherweight bout between Alex Hernandez and Damon Jackson, and right now the odds are Alex Hernandez is the betting favorite at -210, and Damon Jackson's the betting underdog at +162. For this one, I'm gonna go with Aaron Hernandez. I'm not Aaron Hernandez. I'm gonna go with Alex Hernandez, and
Oh no!
I'm gonna go with
The
Alex
dead
Hernandez on
guy.
this one. And honestly, I don't really like this matchup at all. So maybe Aaron Hernandez as well. But that being said, Alex Hernandez, I'm going with Alex Hernandez. He is making his way down to featherweight, and he at lightweight, he's been explosive, but it's not gone his way. And on the other hand, Damon Jackson's well, he's already lost two in a row, one to Billy Q and one to Dan Ige. And he's tough, and he's been in it at the featherweight for a while, and he can hang. He's beaten Dan Argueta, who's also going to be on this card. And this one, my two weight, Alex Hernandez, he's not that high just because I want to see how that power translates at 145. And Alex Hernandez has been a letdown. He's a guy that, for example, there was a lot of high hopes for him back in the day when he beat Beneil Dariush, but since then he's kind of just gone down, especially after he lost to Cowboy. And that being said, in the matchup with him and Damon Jackson is going to be slightly taller. And Alex Hernandez will have a 1 inch reach advantage. But when it comes to the volume of punches, I'm expecting Alex Hernandez to still throw a high volume of punches. He lands 4.63 significant strikes per minute, while Damon Jackson lands just 3.02. Alex does absorb a high number of punches as well, but I don't know if Damon Jackson's power is going to be enough to put out Alex Hernandez. Out of the 22 wins Damon Jackson has, he's only gone 4 via KO/TKO. So his path to victory is most likely going to be either submission or decision. And Alex Hernandez has only been submitted once in his entire career. So if Alex Hernandez were to lose, it would probably be by unanimous decision. I don't see Damon Jackson submitting Alex Hernandez nor knocking him out. And that being said, now likewise on the other way, I can see Alex Hernandez, because of how explosive he is, I can see him knocking out Damon Jackson. Damon Jackson, he has been knocked out of his 6 losses. He has been knocked down, KO'd 4 of them. So, he was most recently knocked out. It was already slightly over a year ago against Dan Ige in the second round. But before that, he got knocked out by Ilia Topuria as well. And then before that, he was knocked out before he was even in the UFC as well. So, Damon Jackson, he hasn't lost a lot, but when he does lose, a majority of the time, looks like the ref needs to step in and call it quits for him. So that being said, I think Aaron Hernandez is going to be good enough to get a win and get a takedown and probably win via TKO or KO. If not, at least get a decision win. I don't know if it'd be unanimous, but I'm feeling pretty good on Alex Hernandez. I've not given up quite on him yet, so I have him as my 4 weight. Do you have any thoughts on this fight, Nick?
I don't have a weight on this pick, and kind of for what you concluded there, just like I haven't given up on Hernandez, and in all reality, I kind of have. I think this is a disappointing co-main event to have here. I understand we have one of the best UFC cards of all time coming up next week. It just feels weak. It feels forced. It feels like the UFC could have taken the week off instead of force feed us another average card with average fighters at best. For a co-main event, we have fighters that are 1-3 in their combined last 4. I mean, that's just really bad. And I guess my final thoughts would just be, I don't trust Alexander Hernandez coming down off weight. I don't like that he's cutting more and he's already had some weight issues. I would not touch anything with a 25-foot pole on this fight until I see Alex Hernandez looks amazing on the scale, made weight no problem, in which case I would lean Alex Hernandez at that point. But until then, I'm going to take the guy who is established in the division and has proven history. I know Damon Jackson's coming off a couple of losses, but Billy Q is a guy that Hernandez also lost to via KO. So at least Damon Jackson went the distance, and Damon Jackson has some good wins against guys like Dan Argueta and Pat Sabatini, who I have a lot of respect for. Not that Jim Miller isn't good, but I don't think Jim Miller is that respectable of opponent to beat. So Alex Hernandez, in my opinion, is going to need to gain my respect back. Until then, I got Damon Jackson. So thanks for that handicap, though. Officially, Jose will have his 2-weight. I will not have a pick on the co-main event. And to replace my pick for the co-main event, I'm actually going with the side of women's MMA, which any longtime listeners know that it's not something I do too often, but when I do, I am very successful. You can look at a lot of my women's MMA picks this year, whether we even just look last week at Manon Fiorot or the week before at Rose. I have been able to pick multiple female fights correctly this year. In fact, I don't think I've lost a pick on female fights. I picked Yasmin Yaragway back as my 5-weight in February. So just saying, I've got a pretty good history. I picked Natalia Silva back at the beginning of the year in January. So I'm just going to go ahead and pat my back a little bit. I have not lost a women's MMA fight that I have put on the table so far this year. And that streak will continue because guess what? We've got a former champ fighting on the prelims here, and a former champ that really just doesn't get as much respect as I believe she should. Germaine Durandamy, the first champion in her division. I mean, what's going on here? She's beaten Holly Holm, Raquel Pennington, Aspen Ladd. She's beaten the current best women in the division, Juliana Pena, and then she took 3 years off. And I understand that's a lot of time to take off, blah, blah, blah. She's old, blah, blah, blah. Norma Dumont is not impressive. She's just not really that impressive to me. When it comes to Germaine Durandamy, I love her ability, specifically her kickboxing, man. Wow. I'm pretty sure she's undefeated in kickboxing bouts, something like 40-0. It's like a boxing record for her kickboxing, man. I think the time off for her isn't going to look as bad as people assume it will. She's just been there and done that. I just don't have too much concern that she's going to come back looking like somebody different. I really don't. I think we're going to see a lot of the same for Germaine than we saw back in 2020. And Norma Dumont is just not like if this fight was happening in 2020 after she beats Juliana Pena, that's hilarious. That's like minus 1,000. So you're telling me that the difference there is just because Germaine's not fought for 3 years? What are you talking about, man? She's got 4 inches of size, reach-wise, 2 inches of height on Norma Dumont. To me, there's just no world where Norma Dumont like lands a takedown and grapples. Come on, get out of here. Norma Dumont is doing none of that. Germaine Durandamy has only been submitted once in her professional career, and that's just a negligible submission. Like, we're talking about some stuff way before even the UFC even began for her. So this is just not an outcome that I'm willing to consider. I think Germaine Durandamy dominates the standing game, and honestly, maybe doesn't look exactly how she did back in 2020 or 2018, but the fact that she's just fighting a subpar fighter, like, don't get me wrong, if you were fighting Juliana Pena again, I wouldn't even be considering her, right? But she is not fighting some stud top-end fighter. I'm sorry, Norma Dumont. That's just not the case. So I'm pretty happy here to be sitting on Germaine Durandamy's side and continuing my women's MMA streak. Jose, do you have anything on this?
Yeah, so I don't have a weight on this fight, but when I was looking at it, the thing with me was I like Norma Dumont. Durandamy is just that's for me that was a almost like I just being too comfortable because how dominant she's the former champ. And so I felt really comfortable in that, but the part where I guess it made it kind of hard for me is just Norma Dumont. I haven't seen, I guess, enough of her because she did take she was inactive for a little bit and came back, and she's rallied up three wins in a row, but she hasn't beaten anyone too spectacular. So like you mentioned, she hasn't really shown anything as impressive as yet. And I would have liked to think of her as like, I kind of view her more as like as an up and coming prospect and still something left to prove. While Germaine Durandamy, on the other hand, she's kind of getting up there. She's 39 years old, so that's the part of me that's kind of like, and she hasn't fought since 2020 herself. So that's just the two things why I made it hard for me. Like on paper, Germaine Durandamy is dominant and should get this win on paper, but the fact that she has aged a bit and it's been since 2020 since she's last competed, that's the part that I'm a little worried about, especially with Norma Dumont being 6 years younger than her and not. She also hasn't been as active, but definitely more active than Jermaine Duranamy has been since 2020. So for me, I agree with you. I think Jermaine should get this win, but I just did not put a weight on it, to be honest, just because of how long she's been out, to be honest.
Okay. Dude, that's totally fair. I think that's a reasonable thing to say. If you're nervous about the age, then leave this one off, and that's totally fair. I do believe that and those who are listening that might disagree, or even if you disagree, Jose, I personally believe that ring rust is a myth. I don't think it's true whatsoever. I think, of course, if you don't step in the ring, literally don't step in any ring, of course you're going to feel some sort of ring rust. But what I say when I mean I don't believe in ring rust is, I mean, if you go look at the statistics of all the fighters that were supposed to have ring rust and what they did upon their comeback, it is well over 50% win. So I'm just strictly talking not how the fighter feels or whatever. I'm talking statistically. If you go and look at fights in which one of the fighters didn't fight for a year and a half or 2 years or longer, a lot of times that fighter ends up getting the win anyways. It's going to be a similar discussion that we're going to have later in the year, assuming Conor McGregor and Michael Chandler fight. We're going to have the same discussion. Do you think Conor McGregor is going to have ring rust? Blah, blah, blah. I just don't see that being a case. Conor McGregor, of course, is going to be a little different than Jermaine Duranamy, blah, 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 because he's got all this money and he has access to the top lines of everything, whether it's training, access to facilities, blah, blah, blah. But in the UFC, I think that's pretty universal for all fighters. I mean, they're doing a good job of building PIs around the world too. I just believe that Jermaine Duranamy, if anything, what I'm getting at is I think 3 years might have suited Jermaine Duranamy somewhat better. Like, I don't know how her body was feeling. Maybe she needed some rest. Maybe she had some injuries that she needed to let heal, and some of the long-lasting things that come from doing a championship run in the UFC. She said, you know what, I need to take a break. I'm going to come back when I feel better. Similar to Izzy. Do you think Izzy's going to come back and suck just because he just decided not to fight for a year? Like, it's just crazy to me that just because someone decided not to fight for a couple of years, that they're all of a sudden like knocked down a couple rungs. So that's just my personal belief. I'm not trying to push that belief on anybody else, but you can look at the statistics of length of time with a fighter, how long they came back, and that fighter still often wins. I just think the experience difference is way too large here. If Norma Dumont was maybe a couple more wins into her progress at the UFC, maybe if she was able to fight a little bit more highly ranked fighters, because like you mentioned, what's the highest ranked fighter she has under her win belt is Aspen Ladd, who went and lost to Raquel Pennington and hasn't fought since. Aspen Ladd is way far from being a prospect, not even close. In fact, a bust, and she lost to her. So I'm just really not, or no, she didn't lose. Aspen Ladd lost to Norma, but it was a unanimous decision. Like, it wasn't even like Norma just cleaned house. I'm just not impressed. So yeah. And again, this is only a 2-weight for me. This isn't some 5-weight pick, but I do believe Jermaine Duranamy with relative confidence is going to get this job done. Moving on, though, from that, we have the final pick of the afternoon for Jose and I. This will be the 6th fight that we have covered on UFC Vegas 90. This will be the last fight that we discuss because this will complete our 5-weight section. And that will be each of our 1-weights for at least my end of this 1-weight pick. I'm going to be taking the tall, the lanky, the man we got to see in person for the last UFC Nashville event. I'm going to be picking Ignacio Bahamondes. Ignacio is like I already mentioned, he's a tall, lanky dude fighting Christos Giagos, and I really just think it's going to be a situation of piecing up Christos from the edge. I think Christos is a good fighter, right? But he isn't anything impressive over the top. Maybe his most impressive win recently was against Ricky Glenn, but I think we all know Ricky Glenn is not the kind of guy who's going to take all these huge punches. Like, Ricky Glenn got KO'd a couple times in a row is what's happened. So I'm not sure how much we can trust Ricky Glenn's chin, to be honest. And getting that win against him in like a minute and a half, Like, it's impressive, but is it really that impressive? I really do not see anything similar to that happening to Bahamondes. And I get it. Ignacio is coming off a loss to Ludovic Klein. That is a tough decision loss. But at least Ludovic Klein has looked good since that fight. He went and dominated AJ Cunningham back in March last month. It wasn't even close. So at least Bahamondes is losing to respectable guys who are clearly good prospects. And to me, one of the only paths to Christos getting the win here is if he's able to apply the wrestling pressure, which I will admit, in the small cage, it'll be easier for him to apply that pressure, get into the clinch, get into the grappling scenarios with Ignacio. But I'm going to say that I have more confidence in Ignacio deflecting those attempts with his 85% UFC takedown percentage, defense percentage at least. I think he's going to be able to deflect. Like, Ludovic Klein is really the only one to land a solid takedown on Bahamondes. I just don't see Christos being able to do the same. His takedown average is low, and I think his takedown offense isn't that impressive whatsoever. He uses it heavily against those who are bad against takedown defenses, landing 5+ takedowns against a couple of his opponents, and then landing 0 takedowns against guys like Arman Sarukian and Thiago Moises and Daniel Zellhuber, who he wasn't able to beat. So I'm seeing sort of a trend here where if Giagos isn't able to get a guy down and manhandle him on the ground a little bit, he loses the fight pretty much significantly. So I'm seeing that happen again. I'd go so far as to say Bahamondes comes back and gets a KO win here against Giagos. What do you have, Jose?
Yeah, Nick, I agree with you for this one. I also have Ignacio Bahamondes as my one weight, and you pretty much said it as well. Uh, Ricky Glenn, he's not. I mean, my bad. Uh,
Christos.
Christos, my bad. I'm a little jogged up right now. Christos Giagos, he's not really being anyone as impressive. Yeah, like Ricky Glenn, just his one win out of his last four. And granted, he went against some bigger dudes and better dudes like Armin Sarukian and Daniel Zellhuber. You know, for that fight, I call it for Daniel Zellhuber as well. Just he's a prospect going in. So Christos Giagos, he's fought some tough competition. He's fought top competition like Ignacio Bahamondes as well. But I think Ignacio Bahamondes has at least looked better in the way he's lost to his opponents. First of all, and in the UFC thus far, he's only lost via decision, and one of them being a split decision as well early on in his UFC career. Is actually his like a first official UFC debut, not counting the Dana White's Contender Series. And that being said, Bahamondes, I think Christos is going to be stronger for sure and initiate the takedown. Ignacio Bahamondes doesn't really have a recorded takedown right now in the UFC, and Christos Giagos, his takedown average is 2.93. But so I do expect Christos being the stronger, bigger guy to come in and want to initiate a takedown. But I think Ignacio Bahamondes, he has an 85% takedown defense, and he does have a 4-inch reach advantage over Christos. So I think what he would do is probably keep his distance and tag Christos a lot and use his wrestling defense to pretty much keep it on the feet. Ignacio Bahamondes is very creative with his striking. He has, you know, in the Dana White's Contender Series, he has that spinning heel kick. My bad. And he is also, so he's got the spinning heel kick as his as a UFC debut on Dana White's Contender Series. That is. So that being said, he is the lighter guy, but he's also taller. He's 6'3". Christos is 5'10", and he has the 4-inch reach advantage. Throws a high volume of punches compared to Christos. Ignacio Bahamondes lands almost 7 significant strikes per minute, while Christos almost lands 3. And so, you know, Ignacio's definitely going to be throwing more than double the rate than Christos in this fight. He may be backing up a lot of the fight, I think. But again, I think because he's the bigger, taller guy with a longer reach, I think he's going to do a good job of keeping his distance and landing more strikes overall. And that being said, yeah, I think Ignacio Bahamondes should get this win. He is my one way just because Christos, again, he's going to be the bigger guy and he's going to press forward and try to get a takedown. But who knows? Maybe on his way trying to get a takedown, Ignacio Bahamondes will just end up KOing him. So I think I see Ignacio, even though Ignacio is a finisher out of his 14 wins, 9 of them come via KO/TKO and 1 of them via submission. This could be one where he may actually just win via unanimous decision and just completely outclassing Christos. That's the way I see it. So I got Ignacio Bahamondes. He's the like can't say enough things about him. He is a prospect, I think, in this division as well. His losses again, he is yet to actually be finished in the UFC, and I don't think Christos would be the guy to do it. So this one, yeah, I got Ignacio Bahamondes as my one weight as well.
Cool, man. So yeah, that being said, it sounds like we'll be agreeing on all of our picks here until except the main event. I was gonna say co-main event, but I was like, wait, co-main event is not even on my ratings because it's not I won't even finish that sentence. But barely entertaining might be a better way to say it. Um, Barely entertaining. So yeah, that being said, the main disagreement, I have Chris Curtis as my through weight. Jose's got Brendan Allen as his 5 weight. Otherwise, the money line lock of the week is going to be Alex Morono, combined 8 weight. You better be picking Alex Morono because guess what? Just about every single week, I'd say at least 3/4, 75% plus. We'll bet you on it. Jose and I's Moneyline MMA Lock of the Week is a winner. You can look at it, look at past episodes, week in, week out. Like, for example, last week, Nursultan Rozibayev was the Moneyline Lock of the Week, and guess what? He hit. So let's keep riding. Jose and I are going to keep giving out wins here. And that win this week will be Alex Morono. If you guys are looking for an underdog pick, go ahead and take my Chris Curtis pick, as he's going to be one of the bigger underdogs that either of us picked on this entire card. Thanks for listening, especially as we started a little bit later this afternoon, but definitely make sure to keep an eye out for us going live next Monday, a little earlier than we did today. It should be at the normal 5:15, 5:30 time, as we will have our picks for the long awaited, the very much so anticipated, the exciting UFC 300, the card in which when this is over, we're all going to be spoiled and we're not going to want to talk about UFC fight nights anymore, because even the prelims on this card are at this point worthy of being main events on a fight night based on the direction UFC is taking this, because yeah, it's just kind of embarrassing. But you know what, I'll quit on that note. Can't wait to see you guys for UFC 300 next week at this time. Until then, have a good week. Let's win some money on Saturday. Thanks for listening.